I don't really like Artian weapons. It's not a secret as to why, because plenty of people in the community feel the same way that I do. However, I'm definitely not as bothered as some people when it comes to the Artian weapon system, because I see the good and the bad. If you're new, hello, my name is Ark, and I am a cursed knight who's stuck guarding a castle all by himself, and I make these videos to pass the time. Artian weapons, the good and the bad. I just want to say that I don't think that this topic is very deep at all, because at the current level of things, this is something that only applies to high rank. Just like in Rise with the rampage weapons, I think that these are going to become obsolete, and then we'll get something better that actually engages with the monster weapon trees. At least I definitely hope so, because if not, then we definitely have an issue. First, I say that we start talking about the positive aspects of the Artian weapon system, because unlike a lot of creators on the internet, I don't like resorting to either an extreme negative or an extreme positive. I like being honest. And honesty sometimes involves seeing the good and the bad. And the Artian weapon system actually has quite a bit of it that is useful. Starting with the fact that it makes it slightly easier to get into new weapons. With the Artian weapon system, even if you just forge the base Artian weapon, you will have a weapon with fairly decent stats. It just makes it easier for you to try out those weapons because you don't have to spend time creating the weapon from step 1 all the way to step 13. You don't have to spend a lot of time upgrading them, they are just yours for the taking. But arguably, weapons like the Zoshia tree and the Mizutune tree, it'll also provide you the same experience. I mean, there's like 1 or 2 upgrades, right? So it's not like you're spending a lot of time on those either, except for those are locked into specific elements and ailments and whatnot, whereas with the Artian weapons, you can kind of make them into whatever element you might want. And the final reason as to why I think that the Artian weapons are kind of useful is because they allow you to create weapons for classes that have statuses and elements that are lacking. For example, some of the weapon classes won't have access to good blast weapons, and therefore the Artian weapons are there to make up for it. And I think that's nice. I think it allows you to fill in niche systems, and in theory it is a good concept. So as a summary, the goods for the Artian weapon system are that it allows you to get into new weapon classes without having to put too much effort into a whole weapon tree, and is a good concept that allows you to fill in the gaps for weapon elements or statuses within certain weapon classes. However, as I continue to make builds in the game, I started disliking the Artian weapons more and more. Starting with my first problem with the Artian weapons is the weapon design. They're not my thing. I think they're too futuristic, and Monster Hunter thrives on a more rigid Viking knight-like aesthetic. But that's totally okay, it's just me being a little picky bitch, and you know, if you like the futuristic aesthetic, that's totally fine. After all, there are monsters out there that provide like Gundam suits for armor. However, one thing that I think is universally disliked is the fact that we can't change their colors. We could do that with Rampage weapons back in Rise, so the fact that we can't do them with Artian weapons is a bit odd. Also, I'm just gonna say it, some of these weapon designs are not that good. Like, I'm sorry, Dual Blade bros, but you guys got a toilet seat for a weapon. Granted, some of the designs like the spinning drill lance and the great sword and the switch axe are kind of cool, but in general, I'm just not a really big fan of how they look. But like I said, weapon design is something that is hit or miss with people, so it's not like you're gonna make one weapon design that's gonna appeal to everybody in the community. My next problem is something that is more core than anything, because I think that the Artian weapon system kind of goes against the core of Monster Hunter. Think about it, in Monster Hunter, you hunt the fire monster because you want the fire resistant armor and the fire weapon. But the Artian weapons kind of say, fuck all of that, I'm just gonna dominate every single weapon tree and you have to use me if you want the best weapon possible. With only a couple of exceptions, like the ones that come to mind are the Guardian Arkveld gun lance, which is still the best one in the game, and I think that the light bowgun has the Raydal light bowgun, which is still pretty good, I don't know. But for most of the weapon classes that I play, like sword and shield, great sword, charge blade, lance, when it comes to what is the best weapon, the usual answer is Artian. And in turn, that really bottlenecks the grind, because you're no longer hunting for the fire monster for the fire weapon. You're hunting the tempered Raydal quest that you can do 3 times in a row that gives you like 11 Artian materials. And in my head, it just doesn't make sense that if I want a weapon that is like ice or fire or water or thunder, I should go hunt the dragon monster to get that material. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I understand that a lot of people think that transmog or, you know, layered weapons would make this problem go away, but I still don't think that's the case. Because you're just painting it over, right? You're just putting a mask on the problem. You're not actually fixing it. You're sweeping it under the rug. Even if Artian weapons could be layered as something else, I don't want to be hunting the same 6 monsters for Artian materials. I want to actually engage with the portions and monsters of the game that were meant to give you specific ailments and specific elements at a better rate. And as someone who's a sword and shield main, and I want to, you know, craft every sword and shield and make builds with every element and every status possible before, you know, next title updates or before the Master Rank expansion, This bothers me, because if I really wanted the best weapons possible, I'd just be engaging with the Artian weapon system and that's it. I don't think a single one of the sword and shield weapons in the monster trees are better than anything that you can get through the Artian weapon system. And listen, I know, the meta is always going to be there and it's always going to bottleneck to an extent where you're hunting one or two monsters. Like with Iceborne, the endgame system basically has everything funneled into Fatalis gear. But then that's the very last monster added to Iceborne and Monster Hunter World. So you don't really hunt anything new after Fatalis, so it makes more sense to have it that way. Although I will admit, I'm still not a fan of having the final monster be the strongest one in terms of gear and that's it. So there's always going to be an element to this, but I believe that the Artian weapon system makes it way more noticeable and a little bit more forced. But let's get a little bit deeper into this topic and talk about the potential issue that is more so with the armor and weapon skills being separate in wilds. Part of the reason as to why Artian weapons are so powerful is because you have 3 level 3 deco slots. And whether you think that this is too powerful and makes the game too comfortable early, or if you think that this actually isn't enough skills to put into your weapon, the end of the argument is the same. 3 tier 3 slots is leaps better than anything the monster weapons can provide. And even if you just make a base Artian weapon without reinforcing it, the stats tend to be pretty decently high. And if you get a god roll in your Artian weapon reinforcement, forget it. Nothing in the monster trees can actually live up to it. I do understand that the trade-off between monster weapons and the Artian weapons are the built-in skills in the monster weapons. But I just think that they don't really make up for the change in base stats. Like, yeah, sure, it's nice that these monster weapons come in with a full set of skills, but what is the point if their base stats and their skills is outdone by the Artian weapons in every category? Again, it boils down to what I said earlier. It just feels like regardless of the weapon that you pick in terms of classes, Artian weapons dominate most of the game. But to calm everyone down, I don't really think that this is a deep issue, because just like what we had in base Rise with the Rampage weapons, the Artian weapons will likely go away. In fact, let's take a step back and talk a little bit about the base Rise ramp-up system. It was a system where you could augment weapons by doing rampages, you get rampage upgrade materials, and you could use those to augment any weapon. You could give them more affinity, you could give them more attack, and even some of them had more specific setups, like the Magnamalo Soul would increase your attack when you were afflicted with Hellfire, which is the status ailment that Magnamalo would inflict upon you. And it all sounded nice and dandy back then until you realized that the rampage weapons would have way more rampage skill slots that you could put in, ultimately leading to a lot better stats in base Rise. Although I will be completely honest, I could be misremembering things here. I haven't interacted with base Rise ramp-up systems ever since it launched like 3 to 4 years ago. So yeah, I'm acting out of memory here, which could be wrong, but I don't think that that will be the case. Although the one undeniable addition that was much better in the rampage skill system rather than the Artian weapon system is that you could change the color of your weapon. Regardless, I've spoken about the pros, I've spoken about the cons, so let's talk about potential improvements and solutions. One thing that definitely needs to happen is an increase in base stats of some of the monster weapon trees, specifically in raw damage, affinity, and more importantly sharpness, because sometimes even a non-reinforced Artian weapon will have pretty good stats that level above some of the maxed out monster weapon trees. It wouldn't be the end of the world if my Rathalos sword and shield had 5 less damage than an Artian weapon, but having it be like 15 or in some cases 20 when the white sharpness is already miles above what you'd get with a monster tree, then it's kind of a problem. So yeah, I think a couple of buffs here and there and some of the weapons in the monster trees would be necessary. But that's the most on-the-nose solution that everyone could probably think of, like just buff the monster weapons and then the problem won't be as prevalent. However, I think an even more creative solution is to make more unique weapon skills like the White Flame Torrent. Because the way that White Flame interacts with something like the Guardian Rathalos Scorcher bonus is just nice. It might not be super meta, but it's fun. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, when you use a Zoshia weapon, it will have the White Flame Torrent skill, which means that every 3 or 6 seconds, I don't know, I haven't done the math correctly, you can proc like exclusive damage that will never change regardless of where you're hitting the monster. At a base level, it's about 50. But if you use the Guardian Rathalos set and you have Scorcher as a bonus, then that number can increase to almost double, making it so that you proc almost for 100 damage every 3 to 6 seconds. Like I said, my math isn't exact here, so people that make build videos do call me out in the comments. You guys know more about this stuff than I do, but I'm just saying it's a fun interaction, and it's a nice way to make builds creative. if more weapons had stuff like White Flame Torrent, for example, I don't know, for poison or paralysis or whatever it may be, it would make me far more interested in making sets with those unique weapons and skills than going for Artian weapons. And because the first title update has already dropped one of the set's skills, I'm hoping that every title update will do the same. Other than that, it's like I said, I don't think that the Artian weapons are going to last that long, just like the Rampage weapons back in base Rise. I think that they will eventually fall off, whether it be because of the unique weapon skills being introduced in future title updates, whether it be because of some weapons getting buffed in the monster weapon trees, or whether it be because we reached G rank / master rank and now this system is no longer supported. But that's all I got for you today. You know the drill. Stay safe, and until we meet again.